Alright, so this is a remake of the old video I had. The old video was like an hour and 20 minutes and was just mostly monologuing. This is going to be more of a me just explaining the build and trying to keep the video under 20 minutes. So this is the budget build. Um, for the budget build, here is the important stats. This is a PvP only build, just to make this clear as day. This is not something you would use for PvE. If you're playing for PvE, please do not build this build. You will not heal your teammates enough, or if you do, they're not messing up or anything and you're perfectly pushing your buttons. I mean, you could, I just don't recommend it. Um, Basically, this build has a decent bit of attack speed that we can make higher or lower depending on preferences, which I'll get into. This is so when you're in PvP, when you're trying to get off skills like Clay's Salvation here, it's not going to constantly get interrupted by chain pulls or stuns. The range is for obviously so you can reach your teammates further. Um, The further away you are, the safer you are as a healer, because no matter what build you use, if you get plucked by a chain pull into, like, say, an arc boss on top of it, and then you have 15 Hellfire Rains fall on you at the same time, you're probably gonna die. So having enough range to just stay away from those people so they can't chain pull you, but still close enough to heal your teammates, is a indirect way to basically just have better collision resistance. Damage reduction is what I could get it. It could be better, it could be worse, but it's enough. Defense I just have in here just so you can see what it is. Um, for those of you who don't know, for how defense works is it's x divided by x plus 2,500. So basically we'll just call it 3,300 for easy math here, divided by, so you just add 2,500 to this, so that's 5, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, so 5,800. That means the defense is giving us a roughly 57% damage mitigation, which is not bad. So a lot of the DPS classes who only have like 2,500 of the defense or 27 or 28, they're roughly mitigating 50% or so. Endurances, as you can see, the PvP endurances are extremely high. The how endurance works, specifically to build it in a way where it actually keeps you alive, is you have to pair endurance with damage reduction, skill damage resistance, and max HP. Basically, the endurance makes it so, for those of you who don't know, the description is right there at the bottom, increases the chance of evading critical hits and taking minimum damage from melee attacks in PvP. This is because it's melee endurance, ranged and magic is melee or whatever else. If your stat is higher than the target's magical, or if your endurance is higher than the enemy's crit, for every 10 points of difference, you get roughly 1%. For those of you who don't know, this equation is x divided by x plus 1,000. So, say somebody's attacking you and they have 3,000 crit, we have 4,000 endurance. That is a 50% chance that they hit us with their minimum damage. The other key thing about endurance, if I have one endurance more than your crit, you cannot crit me. So any crit items you have, any crit damage, is a useless stat that will not affect me. The other reason why 3,000 endurance is not enough when most people build, say, 2,500 to 3k endurance or crit chance is literally because dagger alone can shred 800 endurance off of you. So whatever this number is, subtract 800 from it. That is the maximum amount of endurance you can have removed from you from debuffs at one time in the game. So we technically have 3,200 endurance of these two, and then 3k magic endurance. That's why we have to have so much endurance. Then, so basically, for the Trinity real quick, the endurance makes it so they do not hit you with really big numbers. Then, with a mix of your defense stat and your skill damage resistance, you make the number smaller and smaller, and then your damage reduction stat makes it as close to 0 as possible. When you mix damage reduction making the initial damage low with skill damage resistance and defense lowering it by a percentage. The damage reduction stat here, when it's roughly 200, can actually mitigate the damage they would deal to you by about 50% or so. Um, Basically, this makes it so with this build, if anybody hits you for like 3,000 damage or less, they do 0 damage to you. It is very common for me to be getting hit for 0 damage by anybody that's like a dagger or a crossbow. Any weapon that has a very low minimum damage will hit you for much less. Staff players will almost never hit you for 0. Just keep that in mind. But that's why we build heavy attack evasion. Curse bombs, staffs, deluge no staff, literally orb for crying out loud. The void orb of doom and gloom for literally everybody who's on the receiving end of it is because they build a bunch of heavy attack chants. I have many orb and staff players or friends who play orb and staff on a very high level. We're talking about top guilds for arc boss contributions, taking thrones, stuff like that. People who are getting 7 to 8 kills in one ability rotation off of like one clump and such. They have like 1,000 crit chance and like 2,000 heavy attack chance. Because Void Orb hits 20 times or 40 times. Yeah, it's 40 times. In like basically 1.5 seconds. If you just build a bunch of heavy attack chance, even if you do minimum damage and do like 500 damage a hit, 500 times 40 is still 20,000 damage. And that's assuming they min roll on every single one. So that's why we have heavy attack evasion on here, is so that just doesn't happen, because heavy attack turns those 40 into 80, and that's scary. Max health is what we could get it at. We need our defenses, aka endurance and heavy attack evasion, skill damage resistance, high enough to where our HP does not get bursted down. Anything after that, we try and get the HP as high as possible so it takes them longer to burst us down, because there will be times where your teammates will die and you will want to stay alive until they get back. I say that because not all the time all of your teammates will die. If you're in a guild versus guild content, like say a boonstone capture or something, and you have to stay within an area, if your DPS die, but you're in charge of healing 2 tanks that are barely keeping the objective in your guild's favor, because it's whichever guild has more players in the objective is the one who's capturing it, it's still your responsibility to heal them. Your DPS can come run back to you after they respawn and get heals. If you're in a party with only DPS or people who aren't capturing the objective, you should run back to spawn and go heal them when they get back. Otherwise, they're high targets for getting picked off right after they respawn, and then you constantly have teammates that are just never in the fight. Cooldown speed, it could definitely be better, but given that as long as you can just push your buttons in the correct order and time them well enough, you can spread your abilities out well enough to keep them alive. Now, I say that with the assumption that you're actually hitting your entire team with things like Clay's Salvation, and you're hitting the entire team with Flash Wave, and you're using Fountain of Life on yourself or on 2 or 3 tanks in your party that actually sit in it. If you're trying to use Clay's Salvation as an emergency heal on a single team member, you're not going to have enough CDR in this build to keep playing that way. Learn to do better if that's you. Buff duration, it could be better, right? Just like with cooldown speed, but the buff duration is enough to where you can easily keep Flash Wave almost at 100% uptime. And you can also cycle it with Nature's Blessing as well, and then Nature's or Healing Touch as well as Fountain of Life. Like, you will always have healing over time abilities on your teammates. Debuff duration. I feel like this is an extremely slept on stat for healers, because a lot of the times, the only times I will ever die when I'm going full defense healer is when I either get curse bombed, because the Tevent Wand and Tevent Orb curse bomb combo for PvP actually heavy attacks me, and then they just kill me because it does enough to just one tap you through your max health. Or if you get chain pulled, which is just pretty much guaranteed death depending on the situation, or if it's a scorpion. Those are really the only 3 things that will ever truly just almost instantly kill you with a build like this. Scorpion, is assuming it is like a 7 to 800 bonus damage Scorpion. That is 500 true damage every time they hit you with an attack, and even when it's the additional attack that doesn't benefit from it, it's guaranteed to do at least some damage, and it's not going to hit you for zero. And they can basically just pepper you down if you don't get help. Um, but debuff duration is because I was dying to dagger greatsword players. Basically, if you used Cordy greatsword, you could space the stuns out from dagger and greatsword, as well as the prones and the silences, to where you could 100% kill a seeker without them being able to do anything. You basically put them into a cutscene until they die. Weaken resistance is literally just lack of a better option. It's really good to build some weaken resistance if you can, just so the debuffs don't get applied to you as quickly. But you're still going to have 2 to 3 rows of weakened debuffs on you at all times in large scale content if you're a frontline healer who's healing tanks, which is what this build is for. Skill damage resistance could definitely be higher, but this is the budget build, so that's not really gonna be a thing this time. Um, yeah, yeah, budget build, budget build. For the budget build, I would possibly recommend. So we have the 4-piece artifact here and the 2-piece. The reason I say possibly swap this out for the budget build is because the 6-piece of Greed Seeker gives 125 skill resist, so you could swap out 1500 HP for 125 skill resist, and now we're back up to 914, but HP goes down by a noticeable little bit. That'll be entirely up to you and what artifacts you have. If you're curious about what stats I have for the artifacts, here's this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. These two literally don't matter. They really don't, I'm not gonna lie. I have critical hit on here because mathematically speaking, for a seeker, if you crit your heal, it will do more healing than if you heavy attack it. Just it's also more enjoyable when your heals are a bit more consistent on the higher end. Because if I heavy attack the 108 versus crit for the 200 just feels better. The other thing is with crit and heavy for healers, this is not these numbers. Most of you probably know who use healers. These don't feel like they're accurate because they're not. For crit and heavy chance, it is x divided by x plus 1000 for yours, but for healers, it's x divided by x plus 3000, x being your stat. This is because your teammates' endurance and heavy attack evasion do not get counted into it, for obviously good reasons. But to balance that, they just make it so it's way less. So basically, if you have 1000 crit chance or heavy attack chance on a healer, it is a 25% chance that you crit or heavy. If you have 2000, it's like a 40% chance? Yeah, it's a 40% chance because it's 2 over 5. That is the basic stats, explanations as to why I'm running them. I'm actually probably going to keep this as this one because the skill damage resistance from this is really nice. However, we do use the Ancestral Armor one here for that bonus max HP, specifically for the other builds when we already have the higher skill damage resistance, because, for those of you who don't know, this increases your max health by a flat 5,000, but it also heals it by that 5,000 as well. This heal ignores all anti-heal in the game. So if you have 90% anti-heal or the one white tier 3 wand that gives you a 99.99% anti-heal, this ignores all of that and forcibly heals you for 5,000. This you can use as an emergency oh shit button to keep yourself alive if you know you're about to die but your teammates are on the way. Otherwise, the Greed Seeker can basically give you more survivability against hard CC chains. Also about debuff duration, I just want to put it out there. I have not personally confirmed it, but I have had people tell me that debuff duration sort of has a soft cap of roughly 40%. I don't know how accurate that is, But if it is accurate, we do have things in this build set in, so you can easily swap that to attack speed. Now, for the choice of armors and such, I mean, attributes are evened out pretty well. We're defaulting more to Fortitude for the additional endurance, magic defense, and resistances across the board. But basically for the weapons, we are using the Arc of Lunar Radiance as the longbow for the budget affordable build because the only other option is the World Boss longbow that is always owned by guilds and is expensive. Otherwise, you have a heroic longbow for an option, and realistically speaking, this gives 17 dexterity. That's not good for a healer, at least not for this build. Its passive is it gives us more attack speed so we can use this and then very quickly get our combo off. So you can use this as needed to sort of help with that. There's like no support bows in the game. There just isn't. Like this, the bow I used in tier 1, if I remember correctly, for my build was this one. This is the bow I used for tier 1 as a seeker. I did not use Alon's because it gives dexterity, hit chance, and bind chance. That's not useful for a healer at all. A lot of people like to use Carnix for the strength and the critical hit chance and the range aura that it gave, which made sense. But for the build I was running, because I wanted the 4-piece healer set, Longbow the World Tree was just the only option because I needed the wisdom. For the wand, this wand has slightly different stats than the other two builds. This one has Fortitude and Debuff Duration and Wisdom. As you can see, we can lower Wisdom by 1 to get 6, and we can do this. We could lower it to 4 and still get the Wisdom breakpoint. But then we have to give up either Strength, which is not a good idea, or we give up this for range, which is also not a very good idea. But you have to have 80 Wisdom because of the Longbow passive from the Mastery that gives you 10% CDR. As you can see, our cooldown speed goes from 35 to 49. So we get 14 CDR just from having that much Wisdom, which is extremely important, obviously, because our Wisdom is already pretty low. So this is definitely a priority for the build if you can help it, but 4 is basically the minimum as long as you're willing to lose a breakpoint somewhere else. For the armor sets, I have two different 2 pieces, so it's a 2x2 build basically. We have this one, which just gives 240 of each endurance, and then 100 of each endurance, 120 to each of your teammates that are around you within range, which because of your passives and stuff, like longbow passive here, this one gives up to 360 endurance when you're within range of party members. So it synergizes with the built-in abilities of the build, so you'll be giving it to your teammates as well. Then there's Vanguard for, more perception, more endurance. For if you're curious about the actual stats, the Auric Vanguard set is giving us 225 endurance, whereas this set, the Eternal Warlord, is giving us 240. So the 2-piece Eternal Warlord is giving us more endurance than the Auric Vanguard, but the Auric Vanguard gives us Fortitude, so it technically still gives us overall more, but it also is mostly just giving us the breakpoints. Next up for the boots, we have these because it gives us endurance overall, and then we can select magic endurance for the trait. So we are triple dipping with magic endurance here, main stat, trait, and resonance. That's why we are able to get our magic endurance so high. This is sort of mandatory. For the cloak, we have damage reduction, endurance, and range. If you don't care for the range, you can easily swap this for something else like max HP. I do not recommend mana cost efficiency because we already have plenty of it. 43%, you'll never run out of mana. I don't even fear people who mana burn me because I regen mana faster than I can spend it with the abilities. As long as you don't have like 3 or 4 people constantly mana burning you. So yes, you can swap range for max HP. That's really the only one I would recommend unless you're doing like crit or heavy or something, for lack of a better option, or it's For the traits on this, I have max HP, skill damage resistance, and debuff duration because weaken resistance is not a priority for me, although you can easily just swap max HP for weaken resistance. And if debuff duration is capped at 40%, you can totally just remove that and do max HP or silence resistance or collision resistance. It's entirely up to you. For this build though, I have it set to max HP because even if I build 2 to 3,000 weaken resistance, I will still have 2 to 3 rows of debuffs on me at all times. For the necklace, this is the budget necklace. Most of you probably already have this. Pretty straightforward. It's chance here, so we just do these stats. For the bracelet, we use the heroic bracelet because it gives us wisdom we need for the breakpoint. It also gives us overall heavy attack evasion. We can then get more heavy attack evasion down here if we wanted to, and then we're also getting endurance. It also gives us attack speed and fortitude to go along with our max HP and debuff duration. As I said, if you care more about having those resistances, like you wanted a collision resistance more instead of weaken, you can totally just change the traits, and it's entirely your choice. This is more set to my personal preferences. We do fortitude here to hit breakpoints because we're broke on the fortitude scale, basically. We have endurance here for lack of a better option because we cannot get heavy attack evasion. We can get cooldown speed here, so if you are personally not a fan of the attack speed, or you're like, I'm good with the attack speed from this longbow passive, you can totally swap out the attack speed for cooldown speed, and now we're up to 57%. Personal preference, I personally like the attack speed. For the rings, this one is very self-explanatory. Fortitude, strength, heavy attack evasion, PvP endurance. Literally S tier for every single stat on this item. Then this ring for fortitude, perception, endurance, and heavy attack evasion. And because of the two-piece Auric Vanguard, perception is giving us even more endurance. This stat is giving us even more endurance. We have the endurance brooch. If you have the heavy attack evasion brooch, you can totally do that. To clarify, for those of you who are curious, we currently have 2108 heavy attack evasion. We really only care about magic heavy attack evasion, by the way, from staff and orb players. So if we change this to this, and then we scroll down here, and we did heavy attack evasion here, we do go up to almost 30 or 2500 heavy attack evasion. I'm sorry, but like nobody has more heavy attack chance than that. You might see someone at 2800, but they are sacrificing plenty of other stats just to heavy attack you for like 10% of the time. Our endurances do dip to 3600 with this build, which is still really high. I just personally prefer the higher endurances rather than making it so the enemy doesn't heavy attack me as much. For the earrings, we have these. These are pretty easy to get from loot chests and whatnot. They're also pretty cheap to buy if you absolutely have to because you're just super unlucky. They give side damage reduction and side endurance, but we mostly use them for the wisdom and fortitude stat. If you have, where are they at? These, I would recommend these earrings if you have them. If not, don't worry about it. I say this because the front and side damage reduction feels really good if there's a lot of scorpions on your server. This will have a very noticeable effect. If you don't have a bunch of scorpions or you already have the earrings of refracted light, don't worry about it. The earrings of refracted light do give us more damage reduction on the side, so it's not that bad. Next up for the belt, we do have a tier 2 belt. There is a lot of tier 2 items in here. Wisdom, strength, melee defenses, whatever, we just don't even care about that, but it does give us heavy attack evasion. This is the only belt, really, that gives heavy attack evasion, outside of the stupid expensive one. So if we search for heavy attack evasion, we have the Cunning Ogre belt, which this is just the upgraded version that gives you one more wisdom. If we do this belt, we can then lower this by 2, up this by 2, and now we can have 4 for wisdom. This means you can meet all breakpoints if you get this upgraded belt, which you have to craft for it, by the way. It's actually pretty easy if you just save up your co-op dungeon tokens. And if you buy one wisdom trait and then from the market or get a lucky drop, you can then use unlock stones to get the first 2, use the bot trait from the marketplace or have the lucky trait drop for the second one, and you're done. You don't need to upgrade this to 8. If you do upgrade it to 8, all you're doing is getting 4 attribute points for fortitude, which gives you 20 endurance and 20 of each resistance. If that's not worth 4,000 plus Lucent to you, don't sweat it. Literally, please don't. It's not worth it. But if you do want it completely maxed out, then totally go for it. Otherwise, if you don't have the upgraded belt, you have to have this at a minimum of 6 if you want all the breakpoints. For runes, it's pretty self-explanatory. Double heavy attack evasion whenever you can, and then more skill damage resistance. If we wanted to, we could pump that up to 8 wisdom, lose 4 here, pump 4 here, and then we can break this to gain, what's it called? You can break this to do triple skill damage resistance or triple heavy attack evasion. So for those of you who do not have chaos runes of heavy attack evasion but still want to meet the heavy attack evasion breakpoints, 2100 is sort of like the minimum, by the way. Really, 2k is the absolute minimum. Keep that in mind. 2k is absolute minimum for heavy attack evasion. If you don't want to die to orb players. That means you can do this for one of your weapons and then do triple magic heavy attack evasion if you don't have chaos runes, and you can still meet those breakpoints. But that requires you to have 8 wisdom on the wand maxed out. Just know that that's an option, especially for other builds. DPS players, please use triple skill damage boost red runes on this. On your both weapons. It will increase your damage by about 20%. For those, to explain this further, 42 skill damage boost, right? So 42 times 6 of them is 252 skill damage boost. If we divide that by 1,252, that is a 20.1% damage boost. Please do this if you care about killing people faster. Next up, runes. I don't think there's anything else for the runes. I mean, you should have access to the quest log, so you'll see it. I mean, here, pause where you need to see where rune placement is, I guess. And then a whole bunch of max HPs, basically. But runes are heavy attack evasions, these, these, yeah, and we are doing double max HP on these, by the way, so if you had, we could go even higher for endurances. We could easily get 4k magic endurance if you wanted to drop the HP. I don't recommend that, because it'll be noticeable, and it's not needed, because most magic players build more heavy, and they don't ever reach this high crit anyways. Unless it's like a dagger staff. So if you're dying to dagger staffs, I might recommend lowering your max HP to get more magic endurance. There's other runes. Next up, we have the higher tier sort of budget build. This one sort of gives the highest possible defense available to you as a player because of the attribute points on this. This is the budget. These compare each other. They're pretty much identical. As you can see, literally only the weapon changes and then a few attribute points or whatever on the her gear. But basically, this build has more minimum damage in range, so your heals will be more consistent and you can heal people from further away. Whereas this build has more CDR and skill healing. So your heals will heal more, but you'll have to be further away. To put this in perspective, this build has a range of 22 meters. This build has a range of 25, almost 26 meters. Pi r squared, if you remember from school, that is a very big difference between these two. Very noticeable. But yes, so for this one, this is technically slightly tankier and more expensive. You notice really the only difference is the necklace. This is like an 80,000 lucent necklace. This thing has a drop rate of 1 out of every like 470,000 times you run the dungeon, you'll get this once. Um, Assume you're not going to get it. Otherwise, you can only get this necklace from a Nebula boss, which those of you who know, specific guilds own those Nebula bosses, which is why this thing's price doesn't drop, because it's the same guild selling it every single time. However, the reason we want it is because it has PvP endurance of all types, skill damage resistance, fortitude, and collision resistance. So if you're going for a collision resistance seeker, this is sort of like a must-have. But not to the point where you should swipe for it. I would beg your guild members to give it to you instead and like go do Nebula bosses. Here's the stats for it. For the artifacts, we do have this still, so if we wanted to do this, we could get skill damage resistance to 1034 in this build if we wanted to. I'm not going to because that's diminishing returns, and I'd rather have the nice even looking 3500 max HP. Other than that, the belt you can change to Belt of Clutching Fear. The wisdom will drop, so at that point you might have to look into these stats here. You might have to drop this for like strength or wisdom or something. You'd have to drop something somewhere to get it. It's much easier to do it with this build because the longbow here gives wisdom, and it's much easier to hit those breakpoints of you use this with Belt of Clutching Fear, max HP, you could do weaken resistance or whatever if that's what you're going for, it's up to you. And then for artifacts, boom, equip full set, and we're up to 1148 skill damage resistance. And the heavy attack evasion is higher too, with endurances across the board. As you can see, this build literally just has more stats overall across the entire build. Save. There. This is like super stupid expensive build. This is still in the range of affordability, but you have a expensive necklace. This build is like one piece is expensive. This build is everything is going to be more expensive. But that is basically the explanations of these builds. The purpose of this is one to just explain the build better and to emphasize this is PvP only. Do not use this in PvE, please. There's like literally anything is better in PvE than this stuff. More range, more CDR, that stuff. Now, you won't die in PvE either. You'll probably be more tanky than the tanks in PvE, but regardless. Where would you actually use this in PvP? Because this is not going to be a build for Seekers and for every Seeker in all of PvP. This is like you are the personal healer of your guild leader as he is trying to capture the throne on Siege Day. This is for you are actually on the objective for Boonstones and Riftstones, helping to capture it right alongside your tanks. This is a healer build for people who are on the front lines and actually like getting hit constantly, and you still need to be alive so you can throw out heals because a dead healer has 0 healing. The most important thing for a healer is to not die first and foremost, so then you can do your job. If you're dead, you can't do your job. The moment you die, your entire team's gonna die. Now granted, this build will not save you from bad positioning and not paying attention to the flow of battle. Please keep that in mind. I'm going to end the video here. I will leave the quest log available. Here is the link, share, copy. There's the link. Manually type it if you must. I cannot post video or post links in the description or anything of the video because I haven't sent an image of my driver's license to YouTube and I don't plan on doing so. So there's the link to get to it. just for proof, it is set to hidden. We can set it to public. It is called personal healer. It is a healer and a tank. So if you want to search for it this way, or search for it using the link, by all means, it's up to you. I do have a few other things in here, but it's whatever. Don't worry about it. Like most of these are super niche builds. If you absolutely must know, yes, these are the stats of my freaking Templar. If you wanted to be a healer that just didn't die and just kept your team alive by healing other tanks, this is a tank healer build for capping. Yes, that's 5,000 endurance, but there's not almost any heavy attack evasion. So like I said, I don't recommend this build. It has major flaws. These are not revised. Only these builds are revised. But I'm leaving them there so you guys can look at them if you must.